Hello YouTube, welcome back to more Hagakure wisdom. Last week I left you right at the start of a very juicy paragraph, one of the best idea that Shoujo presents in his book and one of my favorites too. He says, Ite advised that this is how to achieve salvation, but even so, the way a samurai should approach life is different. If you don't believe rather audaciously that you are the singularly most gallant warrior in Japan, it will be difficult to exhibit true valor. The extent of one's courage is evident in one's confident attitude. This goes against everything that the modern world is trying to teach people. We're being taught to be humble. We're being taught to never recognize our greatness. We're being taught to always lower our head, always look small, weak, feeble. Shoujo tells you no. Even if you're small, weak, and feeble, you should behave like a lion. You should show that you believe in yourself. And this has nothing to do with arrogance. It has nothing to do with an unheard sense of pride. It's just the only way that exists to guide you on the path. Because how exactly are you supposed to shoot for greatness, to want to develop a perfect body, if you don't even have the guts to say that you want it? The only way to be able to achieve those things is to actually see them in your mind, and you need to be able to verbalize them. But so many people nowadays, they are afraid of doing that because they don't want to step out of their lane, they don't want to look ridiculous, they don't want people to make fun of them. And that's terrible, right? Because who cares about what people think? You need to believe 100% that you're the best, right? Is it true? Are you the best? No. Are you going to become the best? No. So what? It's the belief that matters, because that belief is going to carry you forward. That's how men become men. You start as a boy, we all start as boys, but eventually we strive towards becoming better and becoming resilient and becoming stronger and bigger, and eventually these things manifest. But the people who never get to these things, those are the people that couldn't even think them in their mind in the first place, because they were told that this wasn't good, it wasn't a good way to behave, that it wasn't proper, that you're never supposed to shine. Because when you shine, what do? You make other people feel lesser about themselves. And that's no good either. People who feel bad or threatened by your greatness, you don't want to have them in your life because they are misguided themselves. They should feel inspired by the sun that you so nicely show them, because it's a dead proof that they also can do that. So it's of the utmost importance that, and I'm going to quote again, you have to believe that you are the most gallant warrior. That's it. Once you do that, you're going to be able to exhibit true valor, because the extent of one's courage is evident in one's confident attitude. Again, people don't like it when you create statements of valor, right? When you say, oh, I am valorous because, or when you say things, people will want a demonstration. But what people fail to realize is that the demonstration cannot happen without the fortitude to announce things. That's as easy as that. A man who becomes the boxing world champion, at some point or the other, said, I will become world champion. They didn't just become it and then they said it, right? You need to verbalize, and then you manifest, and through your efforts, you create. He continues, and he quotes, Shida also said, if you wonder whether or not you should eat, don't eat. If you wonder whether you should live or die, it is better to die. Very succinct. I really like that type of quotes. So first off, the eat or not eat, it's funny because it's applicable outside of the rest of the quote. So many people eat out of boredom. It's not that your body needs the calories or the nutrients, it's just that you're bored and eating feels good, so you eat, right? You can replace eating with anything that is pleasurable but doesn't produce anything. The issue with eating is that it's going to make you fat, and the issue with a lot of activities that we pursue when we're bored and that are hedonistic in nature is that not only do they not produce anything, they are going to put you within a thought pattern that is toxic in the long run and is going to destroy your life. So keep that in mind. Things that bring pleasure need to exist because there was effort produced beforehand. Things, and it can be actions, it can be producers, it can be substances that give you pleasure that is unearned. Pay attention and be very wary of them because they are usually extremely toxic. As far as if you wonder whether you should live or die, it is better to die. That's straight to the point, but at the end of the day, it's true, right? And it's not super consensual to say, but we do live in an era now where you have people who openly complain about being alive, and that is puzzling to me. I don't get it. I think it started as ironic, but now it's not anymore. People actually believe what they say. It's quite frightening actually, because when you think about it in sensible terms, it means that we're surrounded in our society by people who want to kill themselves, who want to end their lives. And these are not people who suffer from mental illnesses. They are not plagued by a illness or by constant pain. They just don't want to put in the work, right? Because living is suffering, it's sacrifices. But that's the beauty of it. But those people, they've been completely brainwashed into thinking that these things were bad and that life was pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. So whenever the slightest difficulty arises, they're like, oh, I want to give up. And I guess Shoujo also knew people like this, because Shida says to these people, well, right, instead of complaining and thinking, oh, should I die or live? Just die, all right? It's not super nice to say to people, but at some point, people who are pulling their weight don't want to hear others complaining on top of that. So yeah, it is a very nice way to live your life, right? You should always strive towards living. You should always want to live, and you should be grateful to be alive in the first place, all right? That's something that's completely lost. People who complain and say to their parents, oh, I didn't ask to live, I don't know from which circle of hell that came from, but there are certain entities and people that didn't get a chance to live. People stole that chance from them. So be grateful that you actually get that chance, because living is pretty sweet. This time it's Shoujo speaking directly. To enviously praise the ways of another place upon hearing something that makes just a little sense is inane and absurd. That one's home is provincial and simplistic is precisely why it is worth treasuring. Copying the customs of other regions represents shallow imitations lacking authenticity. There are two facets to that saying. The first facet is, of course, nationalism, patriotism, and just the love and adoration towards one's home, right? Here he's talking about provinces, but you can apply the same thing to countries. There are many people who are born in one place, and by virtue of them being born there, they detest it. The same phenomena existed 8 years ago, but the other way around, meaning that people were born in a place and by default they loved that place. I personally like the first version much more, because when you live in a country and you're surrounded by people who love it, there's energy in the air. You feel like you're part of a movement, of something great. People actually want to belong. Unfortunately, nowadays it's the opposite. We live in countries, especially in the Western world, surrounded by people who detest the country they were born in, who are working hard towards destroying it. And it's the reason why there's that negative energy and the constant bickering, is that it's not a good vibration to be surrounded by at all. That's the reason why many people who don't relate leave these places. And the worst part, of course, about these people is that not only do they hate the country where they are from, but they praise other countries. And it's the stupidity of that is the most insulting, because for the most part, they praise a country that they know nothing about, because they've never been there. Meaning that they praise images and certain portions that they've seen on the media, But if they were to actually go there, they would realize that it's the pits, and the place where they came from is much better. But because this type of people talk a lot, but they never actually do it, they'll never actually leave the country, because somewhere deep down they know that where they live is much better. So they'll never actually get that culture shock, they'll never get that punch in the guts that they deserve for trash talking their country. They're going to continue being smug and preferring another place that they're never going to even visit. And that is the first portion of what he says. That being said, there's also a second portion, which is the attitude of some people to change their mind when they get the slightest hint that it might be beneficial or justifiable. Meaning that if you've been following a principle or an ideology, a philosophy that works, it is completely fine to be open to other ideologies, because it's going to complete you as a person, it's going to help you challenge your preconceived notions, it makes you better. But people who flip-flop constantly, and the second they hear something different, suddenly that's their new god, this is awful, because this is the equivalent of going in a circle. You're never really advancing. This is not how to actually make progression when you are walking the path of the warrior. And then I really like that sentence too, that one's home is provincial and simplistic, and that's why it's worth treasuring. That's home, right? We all have a home. For me, my home is in the mountains, and it's very simple. You know, it's a small village. People walk the fields, they hunt in the forest, but that's what makes it home. I have a home in a big city as well. This is not home. It's home to no one. Big cities are home to certain concepts. They're home to financial capitals, but they're not home to people. Copying the customs of other regions represents shallow imitation lacking authenticity. So Shoujo also says that you're copying things that you don't get, cultural values that you don't get, and it's especially comical when you think about the reception these people would get if they actually went to those places and they try and mimic the cultures and the customs that they think they know. I've seen that happen a few times. It's great moments of fun and comedy, because the locals usually don't like that. They like when people come and act respectful and they want to learn, but the thing they hate the most is when some smug dude from a Western country shows up to their door and tries to explain to them their culture. They really don't like that. But it's always funny to see them getting shut down. In the past, warriors often carried their swords upright and close to their bodies in the otoshizashi style, in which the weapon was inserted vertically into the sash. Now, few warriors give much consideration to the way they wear their swords. The Yagyu Ryu school of swordsmanship teaches to wear the sword sticking out horizontally. Recently, samurai do this not because they have learned the Yagyu style or because they give particular thought as to why, but simply because they are imitating the school. A little bit long as an example, but it's quite great. The way you put the sword on your back is going to determine the way you take the sword out of the sheath and the way your first blow or your first defensive posture is going to be, right? So it has its importance. It's very important. And some will tell you that vertically is best for quick attacks and slashes. Some will tell you that horizontally is better to parry. That doesn't really matter. What matters is if you do it one style or the other, you need to know why. And what Shoujo says is many people do it horizontally because it looks cool. They don't get it, right? And this exists also in everyday life. But I want to relate that to lifting, because so many people will do certain exercises, or they'll follow certain programs, or they will follow certain dogmatic ideas. And when you ask them why, they will not be able to answer. Or if they answer, they're going to quote whoever they're following that told them to do that. This is the worst possible thing you could be doing. You would be better off doing something that is equally as stupid, but have it commit from you. Because the issue when you just imitate someone is, when it eventually goes wrong, you can blame that person. And then to rebound to what I said before, those are the same people who, when they finally get hurt or they don't get result from that, they're going to jump to a different figure to follow. They're going to imitate whatever they say. They're going to get hurt again. They're going to jump to another one. What they're doing is they're never taking responsibility. They're never owning their own destiny. Own it. It's your life. It's your body. Create something. If it works, great. If it doesn't, get back to the drawing board. Work on it. Do not look up to someone to tell them what you're supposed to do with your life. All right, Shoujo agrees. You must anticipate all things at every moment of the day. Victory or defeat is all a matter of chance. Avoiding shame is a different matter. Simply be prepared to die. Even if you see no chance of prevailing, just attack. You do not need any superior wisdom or prowess to do this. A heroic warrior, Kusemono, does not concern himself with victory or defeat. Without hesitating, he whips himself into a deadly fury, Shinigurui. This is when he understands. This is when he awakens from the dream. A ton to unpack here. First off, you might raise an eyebrow at victory or defeat is all a matter of chance. What does that mean? Well, it doesn't really apply to lifting, but it does apply to sword fights to an extent. Because there's an old saying, and I say an old saying, it's not old, it's quite modern, that says that the winner of a knife fight dies at the hospital, and the loser of the knife fight dies on the scene. Meaning what? Meaning that when you introduce blunt weapons into the equation, skill is not really a thing anymore, because the blunt weapon has such a potential to create damage that the slightest mistakes you do could just mean that you're dead. And it's the same for sword fights in a sense. So here, even though sword fights, technically samurais are very trained warriors, so the chance aspect is very much reduced compared to two idiots who are using knives for the first time. But it still is there, it still exists. And he says that because he prefaces this by saying that you must anticipate all things. And he discussed that before. But he's basically telling you that you cannot anticipate your own death. You cannot anticipate the outcome of a fight, because if you do enter a fight with winning or losing in your mind, and you're trying your best to not lose, to not die, then you've already lost. So you need to go in prepared to die. Why? Because when you're prepared to die, you avoid shame. If you go in and you try to avoid death at all costs, then you might cover yourself in shame and die on top of it. We're talking about a time where saving face, and saving face in Japan is still very important, but it used to be magnified back in the days. Your honor was more important than your life. This is why samurais would commit seppuku, sometimes at minor offenses, things that you would say, you shouldn't kill yourself over something like this, but it wasn't the same mentality back then. So this is why he says here that you should be just simply prepared to die. And he says that you don't need wisdom or prowess to do this, you just need to go in. So of course that's not an advice that I'm giving you here, because it goes against self-preservation, and we live in a time where that advice doesn't really apply anymore, because honor is now less important than our lives. Be it a bad or a good thing, it's just a truth at this point. But an advice that I could give you also is, if you get in a fight, and of course you should never start the fight, but if you get in a fight, usually people who are trying to instigate that type of confrontation, they are not really looking for people who fight back, meaning that they usually try and find weak prey, and the characteristic of the weak prey is that they let themselves be the victim, meaning that they are not going to really they're going to defend, they're not going to attack. If you put that aside and you say, okay, I'm ready for it, and you just go in, even if you don't know how to fight, chances are the guy is just going to run, because he doesn't want to get hurt. That's the characteristic of these guys. Of course, if you're unlucky and you just end up fighting a psychopath, he's going to knife you, so pay attention. And the last sentence is interesting. This is when he understands, this is when he awakens from the dream. As if life before death was just a dream. Life before the realization that death is nothing is just a dream. This is an idea that I share, and that Stoicism shares as well. Once you are at peace with death, you are starting the first day of your real life because you're not afraid anymore. And this is something that takes a lot of time to cultivate, and it can be lost. A lot of people in their old age lose it. But if you manage to maintain it until the time where you're actually starting to get really close to death, and the day where death is going to come collect you, you are going to be, in my opinion, an advanced being. You're going to be transcendent. And we're going to follow with paragraph 59 and 60, and I think I'm going to finish with 59 because it's quite long. It is unwise to be fixated on a single point of completion. A man who has devoted himself to his studies and believes he has reached a consummate level will assume his training has finished. But this is erroneous. Devotion to the study of one's path, first acquiring the fundamentals and then continuing to refine your knowledge and skills, is a lifelong pursuit with no end. Without becoming content with your level, think critically of everything and spend your life traveling the path, asking, how can I find the truth of the way? Never give up the quest. Continue to practice like this and you will uncover the way. So this is sort of an encapsulation of the concept of never giving up that Shoujo keeps repeating because it is so important. And in reality, he repeats it because it's all there is. It's the most important thing when you want to be a warrior, when you want to travel the path. Just never give up. If you never give up, you can never lose. It's as simple as that. Because losing is not falling, it's refusing to get up. So if you keep getting up, you're unbeatable. It's as simple as that. And of course, he says that you should not be fixated on a single point, meaning that for me, that means no deadline. Don't tell yourself, oh, I want to lift X amount of weight and that'll be my goal and I'll have made it. Issue is, if you reach it, what happens next? Are you going to fix yourself another point and another point? So basically what you're doing is you're balancing the way. You're creating certain points on the way that are going to be what you shoot for. And the issue is that the way is infinite. So you are creating separations, you're creating certain markers on something that is infinite. So what is that doing? It's slowing you down. And it's also making you lose sight of what the way is, of its infinite possibilities. Because now you're so focused on that completion and it's no good. You need to have an overall goal, but it cannot be something that replaces the way. The way is everything. And of course, your training is never finished. Anyone who tells you that they reached a limit, either they're too lazy to keep pushing, or they don't understand the human body and the infinity of potential it offers to us, people who actually own one. You need to be devoted to studying. You need to be a smart warrior. You need to be an educated barbarian. You never need to be content. You need to think critically of everything. And you need to spend a life traveling the way, asking yourself, how can I find the truth of the way? And in a sense, he says that if you continue to do it, you will uncover the way, which in reality means you will never uncover the way. This is a little hint. This is what I personally think is the way. You will eventually die, and this is when you will uncover the way. May prove that what you will, but basically you will spend an entire life trying to figure out what you're walking, and the answer will come to you in death. So I'm going to leave you here. We're not going to do 60. 60 will be for next week. We are 1/4 through the book. So many things to unravel in here. As always, thank you for watching this series. I'm very happy that it's helping and that it's also followed by so many of you guys. And I will see you next week.